we are live. Facebook, thank you for being with us again today. This is your Treasury Talent team. Donnie Gupton, your pseudo host for these fun interviews. And today we're talking about personal branding. That's why I've got my collared shirt on for you guys today. But we've got another topic that came from you guys that we're excited about talking about, and that's just personal branding in your career. Gentlemen, of course, always it's nice to be here with you all.
Yeah, happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday, happy Wednesday. So, Joe, let's just kick this whole thing off with you. Why is personal branding important in your career?
It's important because it's you. You know, it's your reputation, it's your career, it's your performance. And as the old saying goes, your reputation precedes you. You know, it's made up of, and really it's an overview of your performance, how you're perceived by your network, your peers, your coworkers, whether or not they can trust you, whether or not you're going to deliver for them. You know, it's just, when you look at it, you're going to be your own best selling point when it comes to your career, and your personal brand is your selling point, basically. It's it's just one of those situations that people, I think, they miss the connection behind how you're perceived is the reality to other people, and you need to be cognizant and you need to be aware of that, really. And I can't stress the importance enough around personal branding for that reason.
Yeah, for those of you that are just joining us live right now, we're talking about the importance of personal branding in your career. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop that in the comments below. If you like what we're talking about, give us a little love. We would appreciate that. That'll show it to more people. So Scotty, what is personal branding?
Yeah, so I love that Joe mentioned, you know, perception is reality, right? So just like last week, we talked about networking is, you know, it's kind of a business buzzword, but when you boil it down, it's really about, it's just building relationships. Similarly, your personal brand is you know, more or less a fancy way of saying your reputation, but at the same time, you know, it's where do you show up, right? So there's a number of different places where you show up, quote unquote, where you have to manage that reputation. But again, if you want to just kind of take it to its essence, it is your reputation.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is actually a topic I'm excited to talk about because I feel like I can actually add some value here instead of just being a facilitator in these meetings. But, you know, I think, you know, personal branding, especially if we're talking about the digital space, because that's the area I focus, is incredibly, you know, important. Of all the things that Joe and Scotty have already talked about with, you know, how I'm perceived is, you know, is the reality. And, you know, when you're looking at social media, you know, obviously the number one place that we always think about, you know, is having a personal brand on LinkedIn, and, you know, some of the basics, and I think most of you guys listening to this would know, but, you know, is having a professional headshot is the most basic thing that we would want to be doing with our personal brand on LinkedIn. And, you know, you're also going to want to be looking at, you know, LinkedIn offers a lot of great opportunities with, you know, your ability to describe yourself through the headline. A lot of people will just use, you know, the position title of, let's just say, treasurer or treasury manager. Well, how can you get more creative around that position title and draw more awareness around your personal brand so that people get to know who you are, you know, through your social presence. And, you know, when you're employed, it may not be the most top of mind thing, I think, but when you are out on the job market, you definitely want to be paying attention to this that much more, especially if you get in the game with, you know, as recruiters and things, you know, whether they're internal or external, are starting to vet you out. I can pretty much guarantee in today's world that they're going to be going through all your profile, taking a look, and your personal brand is going to have a massive, massive impact. And there's so much you can control on what people perceive to you. And so, you know, if you're not creating content, that's actually a great way to enhance your personal brand from the eyes of your prospective employers and recruiters, is being involved in the community and your thought leadership. And, you know, you don't always have to be the creator, but if you're at least sharing relevant things, I think that really helps, you know, overall, you know, with the online presence. And one thing I'll leave with is having a congruent brand, you know, across multiple channels, because, you know, nowadays, you know, we always think of, well, when it comes to our career and it comes to professional, well, that happens all on LinkedIn. Again, I'll probably be guaranteeing that most people that are vetting you out will look at other social media platforms they can to learn a little bit more about you. as much as we may or may disagree with that, that stuff is happening. And so you may want to be careful about, or at least aware of the things that you're posting out there, because that is your personal brand and that can definitely impact your career. But, for me, I always think of personal branding from the online standpoint, because that's what I am in. Online branding and marketing and lead generation is what I focus on and what I help our team with. So I always think of online branding. But Simon, I know a big part of this is building the offline, brand as well. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, you're right, Johnny, just think these days social media is where it's at. But, your personal brand carries offline as well. And, that really is, again, as Scotty said, it's your reputation and it's how you deal with people. And that, that from a treasury perspective is the advisors that you deal with. It's the bankers that you deal with, even bringing into our world, the recruiters that you deal with. So from an offline perspective, if you're a good person to deal with and people enjoy working with you, that really is going to transcend as your offline reputation. Well, really just what we talk about, reputation. And that really is real, because it's what people are going to say about you when someone else asks. And the reality of that is, people are constantly talking to other people that they know within their network about the people that they're dealing with. And, your reputation gets around very, very quickly. We definitely see people who are hard to deal with. I know even for us as recruiters, they're hard to deal with when they're a client. They're really not enjoyable to work with because they make things particularly difficult. And then they flip to the other side and want to be a candidate and don't think that engagement or the process that we went through before, they have game face on and think, oh, well, I'm a great candidate because this is how I showed up today. The reality is, if you're a hard person to deal with with your banker's going to tell the other people that they bank that you're a difficult person. Your recruiter is going to tell other people that you were a difficult person to deal with when you were recruiting. So to some degree, everything that you're doing is building that the offline brand and your reputation that is going to precede you. And if you don't think people are talking about you behind your back, you're 100% incorrect, because a lot of the time we will have clients that come to us when they're recruiting that want to know about other things outside of just the interview process, or they'll go to the bankers to ask them what it was like, their advisors, your accountants, any advisors that you're using that also deal with the same people. They're going to ask that question of them. And, what was Scotty John like to deal with? Of course they're going to tell him what they thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lasting impression, right? And sometimes, like you're saying, I think that's such an important point that, like, sometimes we're really focused on, of course, we're very sharp and dialed in when it's important, and it's going to impact our career. And when like you say, you got the game face on because you're, trying to show up the right way. But people will remember, every interaction you've had with them, whether it be good or bad, unfortunately, and fortunately, in most cases, and that's important to remember. I mean, Joe or Scotty, any tips on personal branding? I know I threw some out there, for the online presence, but, what else do you guys recommend?
Scotty, you want to go or you want me to go?
I didn't want to talk over one another here, Joe.
Go right ahead, because you go with it. You go with it.
So, I think one thing I want to be cautious of I want to make sure people recognize that we're not necessarily advising people to be agreeable all the time, right? There's in business, some level of disagreeableness isn't always a bad thing, especially if you're challenging the status quo and that leads to better business results. But at the end of the day, I think, some of the things that offline can be really detrimental. It's basic in some ways, common courtesy, but it's not always something you might think about, right? So again, it's how you interact with your vendors, and frankly, even those that aren't vendors now, but might want to be. Are you courteous? Or are you relatively responsive? You know what I mean? Like these are the types of things that vendors are going to remember. But I think most importantly, it's how are you working with the people in your organization? Because sometimes we get our blinders on when we're in a company for long enough and we operate in this frame, and you don't think about like, oh, what's this going to look like 10 years from now or 5 years from now or whenever I need another job. A lot of people really aren't operating with, oh, my next job in mind. And that's, I think, where we just want to be, make people aware that, again, it's your reputation inside your company that extends outward. So I think it's, in some ways, it's a lot of commonsensical stuff. Again, just, how do you interact with people and how do you build consensus? How do you get along? But like I said, it's not necessarily that you have to just be like passive or agreeable all the time. It's just, it's pretty basic, treating others the way you want to be treated. And also, making sure that you are getting business results in the way that's going to be, frankly, best for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up, Scotty. So many times in life, there is the balance, right? Of your personal brand shouldn't be trying to be appealing to everybody necessarily, because ultimately at the end of the day, you want to work for, if you're looking at this from a career advancement, it's not about just getting a job. It's getting a job that you want, where you're going to be a right fit and you're going to fit in with the company culture. So in certain cases, you being you is exactly what you want to be, so that you're attracting somebody else that appreciates you for who you are. That's the whole point of a personal brand. So I love what you're saying there, Scotty. Joe, do you have anything you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, really, when you think about it, it's your values, it's your beliefs, it's how you decide to treat people. I mean, it's made up of so many different things. You don't necessarily need to overcomplicate it, but to Scotty's point, treat people how you want to be treated. And if you feel like you left a conversation or an interaction where, it's not sitting right with you, there's a really good chance that it's not sitting right with that other person. So maybe that's another touch point to be able to check in and say, hey, I don't think that went the way that I thought it was going to. I don't think I communicated my point and my, and this goes probably deeper down the relationship route than we want to, but it's just like making sure that you don't have to be paranoid with everything that you're doing, thinking, oh, I did this and I screwed up, my brand is completely jacked up or anything like that. It's just when you have that self-awareness and you understand that, it's, that you're not acting the way that you would expect yourself to act. It's like, act like the person that your dog thinks you are. It's like that. It's just along the lines of make sure you're putting that perception out there, because you never know who's watching. You never know who's listening. You never know who's paying attention. I know in a previous conversation, we had brought up executive presence, and there was questions around what is that? Well, there are a million different definitions around it. The general consensus is show up, be courteous, and look professional, look sharp. Like when you're walking through the office, you can tell who's highly regarded and who's respected. And that catches the attention of the executives. It catches the attention of your bosses. It's people notice this type of stuff. Maybe they won't verbalize it to you, but you just have to be cognizant of it. Don't overcomplicate it. Just make sure that you're putting the right brand forth, I guess.
And I think on that, Joe, like the important thing there is, I guess what we're saying today is, don't think that when you put your game face on for an interview, that it's just about game day. Like what we're really saying is, people are still looking at the preseason, people are looking at the postseason. They've got everything in mind when they're hiring. And, the way you perform in a 1 hour interview is not the decider 100% on whether you get the job. There's a whole lot of other factors that come into that, and your personal brand and all of these touch points that you've had over the journey are things that are taken into consideration. And the reality of what we're talking about is this is offline, but social media has made it so much easier now for people to get that perception rather than just in an interview, because there's so many more touch points now that this is happening a lot more, that they can get to people that know you really easily to then ask about your offline, but they can do that online. And, to go back to Donnie's point earlier about your title and your headline, there's some really simple things that you can do online that can really enhance you offline. And, contributing on social media and putting yourself out there is a really easy way to actually change people's perceptions and to put yourself out there as an authority and to really be in the game in a different way, that you can start to control how people perceive you by what you contribute. It's still not going to change your offline, but it might change some people's opinion of you by using your online as well. So if you can combine those two, to basically put yourself out there in the way you want to be perceived, then it's going to enhance your job search and your ability to get the career that you want. So I guess that's what we're really trying to combine today, is that, you know, we're looking at this from a careers perspective. We've talked more holistic about it, but combine your offline and your online smartly, and you know, you can put a different perception out there. And it only takes what, Donnie, maybe 6 months to change someone's perception, the way that you sort of can put things out in the online environment.
Yeah. I mean, it can happen quick with months, and more importantly, it's just the consistency. You know, the faster and more consistent you're doing things to change your personal brand within, you know, several months, you're gonna be able to change that perception. And I think, you know, one of the things that's really, really forward thinking is that when you combine this personal branding that we're talking about with some of the other topics we've talked about in the past, and I think it was just last week we talked about networking specifically and the importance of that. You know, there's so much more leverage that is perceived by employers now when you have a massive network based off of your personal brand. There's several stories I've heard where in other industries where people are being viewed as the top candidate, not just because of their skill set and what they can do in the job, but what they're bringing to the table from their personal brand and what they're able to bring to the company. So if you build a personal brand and you can go build all those vendor relationships and you know other treasurers and you are very well connected, and then you go out to apply for a job, you know, and I'm talking more social media here, you've got this is a whole different way of thinking, that you've got a whole nother asset that you're bringing to the table that your next treasurer, you know, may not be bringing to the table. Is, hey, I'm well networked, I know my industry, I know my vendors, I know XYZ. It's a whole different game that's out there now when you combine your personal brand with, you know, some modern, you know, networking. And if you guys didn't get a chance to check out last week's interview, it's on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and search Treasury Talent, you'll be able to see last week's interview around networking. But that is really where I think that it's very forward thinking, but there's a lot of opportunity for people right now. Do you guys have you guys seeing some of that yourselves?
Yeah, so well, I guess I'll take it personal for a moment, just in the fact that, number one, I want to call it out real quick. We did salaries last week, which is also impacted by your personal brand and your reputation and your abilities. So networking was a previous conversation. All of this comes together. You'll see there's a theme here. Part two to that is, I'll just tell you a personal story. I haven't had to apply to a job since college, just due to my network and my personal brand. And really, you know, it's not that I'm amazing. There's nothing to that. What I did was I learned very early on, the more value that you can provide to other people and the more problems that you can help other people solve, it ultimately comes back to you. You leave people with a favorable impression. They start talking about you in their networks. Then all of a sudden you have people who are coming to you saying, hey, either can you help me with this, or can I hire you because this is what I need you to do? Yeah. And that's, you know, again, not to toot my own horn or pump my own tires or anything like that, but that's exactly how I've got along in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, you give yourself a little bit more credit. I mean, you bring a little bit to the table, man.
No.
Scotty, what do you got, man?
So I just want to say, you know, it's sometimes I think, okay, it's easy for us to say, right, the professional networkers, talking about building a personal brand, talking about a presence on social media, you know, and for those out there listening who feel, you know, that's intimidating, or you don't know where to start, or, you know, like you're an introvert and it puts you way outside of your comfort zone. I think two things to note. One, you can do a lot more damage if you know, like, don't drink in Facebook or don't drink in LinkedIn, for instance. Like, you can do a lot more damage if you put comments out there that are negative. And that's I mean, if you don't know what that looks like, you probably need to talk to some other people about how you're perceived. But that's the big thing is, you know, putting something out there that's negative on LinkedIn or maybe polarizing. It doesn't mean you can't have opinions that are unpopular. It just means that you have to, you know, again, manage how you're perceived. So that's one thing, is just, you know, be cautious of that, number one. Number two, I think we talked about it when we did talk about networking, is it's baby steps, right? Maybe make a goal to once per week, just engage on a post that you like on LinkedIn, for instance, right? It's, you know, we're not expecting folks in Treasury who feel completely uncomfortable to go out and try and build thousands of followers. But at the same time, to Donnie's point, you put one thoughtful comment on a treasurer's post that they put out there, and they may not notice it, or it may not look like they notice it, but it's there forever, and they're going to have access to it in the future. And that one thing that you said, that one thoughtful contribution that you made, could be the difference between getting a job and not. So I think, just again, for those that are, thinking, oh man, this is a lot to take in, it can be, slow played a little bit.
Absolutely. We got a great question in from our friend Tanya, who was on here with us a couple weeks ago. And she said, do you think it helps to get speaking engagements at professional events? And
and Tanya, on that note, good luck at the T-Many coming up. So
well played, yeah.
Yes, a very pointed question, but no, it absolutely helps. I mean, that all just helps with, number one, it gets you, especially as you advance in your career, you're going to have to be comfortable presenting in front of people and being knowledgeable about a specific topic and being comfortable speaking about that topic in front of people. I mean, you look at treasurers, directors, ATs, they're managing relationships with bankers, they're managing relationships with the board, whatever it may be. So yes, incredibly helpful anytime you could get professional speaking engagements. And part two of that is it works both ways. You get your name out there, and then you have a well-known organization that's also putting your name out there at the same time. So yeah, in my opinion, at least, I don't know if Simon or Scotty feel any differently, but that's my opinion.
I just kind of think showing up is the important thing, Tanya. It's being able to share. And I'm a big believer, you would have heard me talk before about paying it forward. I think that presenting at a conference or putting yourself out there, at the same time, it's doing something now that's helping other people. And it's amazing how many people, come back the other end. Like, I've got a great example of people that have come on my podcast, and those people have then been approached by others because what they've said has resonated with that person, and so they've approached them to network with them, to get their advice, to take their counsel. So it's putting yourself out there, it's helping others, and that's all part of your personal brand. Like, people that have a perception of you of what you're willing to give, and that is personal branding to a T.
Excellent question. If anybody else has any questions, we're about to wrap it up here. But if you have any last questions, drop them in the comments there in the Facebook group below. Gents, anything else? Any last thoughts that you guys have? I'm gonna make this easy, so we'll start with Simon, so nobody talks over each other.
There we go.
Really, I mean, I just want to go back to my point earlier about you've got to just think about the way you're dealing with your vendors and people that you're working with, because you may not think about it at that time as for your next job because you're just doing your current job. But those people, by default, they are salespeople. By default, salespeople like to talk. So any dealings that you're having with vendors, rest assured that that's getting around within your network. And so the way that you're working in those environments is part of your personal branding, and it's going to have an impact on you getting your next job, even though you don't think it is today. So I just want to really make that point clear that, you've got to deal with people and work the way that you want to be perceived in an interview, not just when you're doing your job.
Excellent. Joe?
Yeah, for me, the overarching theme is just self-awareness. Reevaluate how you're interacting with people. It ties into what Simon was saying too, but it's just knowing how, like, we all get lost in how we perceive ourselves. Don't be afraid to ask somebody else who maybe not your wife, not your husband, because you're going to get a completely different ball of worms or ball of wax there. But ask a coworker who maybe is like a second level, someone who you only deal with on a little every once in a while. Ask a friend who maybe you haven't talked to in a little while. Ask your best friend. Usually your best friend will shoot it to you pretty straight, where it's just like, hey, who am I? Try to get that balance of both the personal and the professional, because that's ultimately what makes up your personal brand. That's the intersection of those two. So be aware of it, take an honest stock, and make adjustments where necessary if you're not giving off the image that you're hoping or that you thought you were.
Beautiful. Scotty?
Yeah, no, I Joe, that was perfect. The second part of what you just shared is pretty much exactly what I was going to say, and that is because self-awareness is not necessarily something we all possess. To your point, just trying to take it like a 360 review of people in your life, right, and ask them for their honest opinion. Because you said it better, and I just reiterated it. Let me add that Again, when it comes to social media, for better or worse, it's just a part of our world today. And so I think, ask specifically about how you're showing up there. And then if you're not showing up at all, make some effort and come up with a game plan, start small, but just, get started, because it does matter.
Excellent advice. And like we said, I mean, this whole conversation around personal branding is a journey. It's not something that you need to solve overnight, and it's really just how you're continuing to show up each and every day. So if you're looking at enhancing it, just take baby steps, and you'll get to where you really want to go. But so much opportunity to do this more now, given all the tools that are available to us. So thank you, everybody that's tuned in and joined us here today. You can catch a replay of this on Friday on our YouTube channel. Again, that's go to YouTube and it's Treasury Talent. We've got a channel with over 50 videos on there. We'll be posting videos on a weekly basis, as well as these interviews and other informative videos. And if you need help filling any roles, you can always reach out to us. If you need any career advice, you can reach out to us here on Facebook. So thank you, everybody, again for joining us, and we will see everybody next week. We've got a special guest, so stay tuned.